Hey Fuzz,
Yeah.
you remember when we used to do podcasts?
Yeah.
It was pretty rad.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I think we did like 9 of them.
Yeah. Chicks really dug it.
Yeah, we had a tough time, just keeping them away.
That's true.
Yeah, you ever want to do that again sometime?
Maybe.
Yeah, we should see if we can get around to that at some point in time.
At some point.
I feel like we have some things to talk about.
That's arguable, but
Some stuff's happened.
yeah. Maybe. Kind of. I guess.
You want to roll one?
We could try.
All right, let's give it a shot.
Hey everybody, welcome to Friday Night Rides, a podcast about storytelling. My name's Fuzz, with me as always is Jonesy.
Hey everyone.
How you been, man? It's been a while since we've done such a thing.
Yeah, it has. It has been a while. I haven't seen you forever.
I know. I guess.
Well, we haven't talked to anybody since November.
Yeah, there's no reason to.
Yeah,
If
sure.
we're not podcasting,
That's right.
then who wants to hear us?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's called, nobody's written,
Not an email.
nothing's going on.
No.
So, this is Friday Night Rights. We get on here and we talk about storytelling like we know. And in the last season, we did 9 episodes, and we covered a pretty wide array of things, from different storytelling techniques like the hero's journey, the 3-act structure, stuff like that. We also delved into the storytelling of comic books, the horror genre, Star Wars, things like that. So that's kind of what we do on here. We just get together and we deconstruct as best we can these different things. And we have taken a little bit of time off because some things have been going on. There hasn't been much activity at our website, FridayNightWrites.net. What we've built there is a community for telling stories, basically. We've tried to enable people to get on there and write short fiction and start a conversation about storytelling. And we haven't had a whole lot of activity, so we're kind of going to pivot on that thing and make it, a little bit more just basic storytelling meta articles, basically, where we get into the guts of storytelling, and it'll be kind of a companion to what we do here on the podcast. But that's to come. So tonight, we're getting together because, in the last year, it's been several months now, but Fuzz did something pretty remarkable, and he published a book. So I'm going to put on my interviewer hat. He's going to put on his author hat, and we're going to have a little interview about the book that he published back in February.
Yep.
The volume 1 in his Autumnville series, subtitled Ouroboros. So we're going to get into that in a little bit and kind of talk about where that story came from and all that good stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be right back after this. We're back. We're gonna dig in here and talk about Phil Connect's book, Autumnville, Volume 1, Ouroboros. He self-published this back in February of this year. It is on Amazon. There will be links in the description of the podcast and on Facebook in the description, yada yada yada, so that you can go buy it.
Many copies.
Yeah, all of the copies. So I said the title. It's Autumnville, Volume 1, Ouroboros, by P. Jordan Connect. That's Fuzz. And the back of the book, here's just a brief synopsis of what it's about. In the idyllic Midwestern city of Autumnville, something infernal has been released from its eldritch prison and risen up with murderous intentions. From the shadow realm known as the Zone, Autumnville's supernatural marshal calls on a ragtag group of miscreants to save the city from the infernal threat. Meanwhile, a group of young paranormal enthusiasts known as the Spectral Spelunkers abandon their routine of searching for evidence of ghosts and spooks and find themselves knee-deep in a bloody battle between the city's supernatural inhabitants and a vampiric war party from Chicago. The war for the soul of Autumnville has begun.
Do you remember when we wrote that, when I wrote that?
Yeah.
Like 2 minutes before we published?
Yeah.
It's like, shit, we need something for the back.
We'll get into the lessons learned as far as the publishing thing goes towards the end of this. But the book, the paperback version that I'm holding here is 258 pages. The paperback version that you can buy is a few more pages than that.
Just a few.
Just a few. So we're going to dig into the storytelling to start with here. So the first question I have, which is kind of a general question, but you can get into, you can take it as however far you want, but where did this story come from?
The general consensus, as I can recall, happened when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I had a thought. I don't remember why. I think it was television. I think I was maybe watching one of those channels that was showing the really old, like Andy Griffith, stuff like that. And I started thinking to myself, like, why has everything kind of gone to hell since those days? Not that anything's really all that different, for the most part, but at the time, I remember I was very, very young, and I wondered, what would it be like if the end of the world came and went and no one knew? And I think, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that might stem from a lyric from an Urge Overkill song. I'd have to look more into it, but there was I just remember thinking to myself that there's been this sort of crazy disconnect from that baby boomer era to now, or to the me at 13, I guess. And just kind of wondering why things were so radically different. And now that I'm significantly older than 13, I realize now there's all these social movements and things that have occurred and have altered the environment and really kind of changed the social climate to transform it into what it is, for the positive and the negative alike. But at the time, I drew a lot, and I wanted to create comic books, and so I was building these sort of niche style characters that were supernatural, but weren't necessarily based on anything I had seen in film or in comics before. But of course, every one of those characters was sort of a bare bones ripoff of another character, usually a Batman character.
Of course.
And so over the years, all of those things sort of changed and transformed into one thing or another, and grew and evolved on their own. And just a few years ago was when I created Vic and Lowell and the West character. TK was a very recent addition to he literally popped up almost right as I started writing it, that was one of those situations where it was like, because I knew TK was your character from the role-playing game days, and you seemed more than hyped to have the character be put in. And so a lot of the background behind a lot of that stuff is, it's kind of hard to remember. Ouroboros was the sort of redheaded stepchild of the NaNoWriMo from last year, and I didn't get very far during the actual NaNoWriMo, but then I just decided to keep going with it, and eventually I got a book out of it. So
yeah, I know. I know. In conversation that we've had before, you've talked about how you've kind of almost romanticized how it's your hometown is a big part of the story.
Yeah.
And it's really got that Midwestern vibe, which you kind of only get if you've been in the Midwest or from the Midwest. But it's always been real interesting to me, like it melds this supernatural world with this kind of almost, 10 years behind the times type of town that we live in.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was really interesting. But I know, being inside, I know where a lot of the concepts and where a lot of the characters have come from,
Yeah, they're all real people.
Right, right. They're all people people you were friends with, have been friends with, are still friends with, all that stuff. For the most part, most of them. I think for me, reading the book, the characters are, the setting's really cool because it's familiar to me. But it may not be familiar to, everybody listening or whatever. Yeah. So they may not get that nostalgic pang from it like I did. But I can say that the characters, I think, are the shining star of the book. Mm. And what do you like, who do you like the most? What do you like the most about these characters you've created?
I think that the majority of the characters that aren't the core four guys, each one of them is kind of pulled from a real character that I've met in my life, and it's so much fun to get to play with these kinds of ideas, these kinds of characters, and to just put them on paper and then just sort of let them go, let them live their life, according to the plot, Right. As far as like the leads, a lot of it is just the kind of fun, kind of childish idea of, if Jim was a vampire, what would he be like? And, and how could I make him as weird as the real guy? With Lowell, it was just, I wanted to write me, but just dumb, and and just literally have him be, a kind of buffoonish, kind of silly character who, for some reason, for no reason, the other guys rely on him to come up with the plan. Like, every time, what's the plan? And he's the one who's there to say, we do this, 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 and this, and it's the only logical thing. And then he turns around and acts like a complete moron for the rest of the time that he exists. Right. It was a lot of fun, and a lot of like TK is patterned after you, and a lot of TK just kind of came from all those years where we gamed, and your character hogs so much of the spotlight that the rest of us often just sat there for hours waiting for your scene to be done. And so the idea of being able to go, well, now I can write this guy and I can do it faster, or I can, what have you. But like a lot of the stuff with, like, say, TK, Wes, and Vic, it's hard to talk about Lowell because he's me, but he's not me at the same time, and all the guys, Wes is Sean but not Sean, and TK is you but not you, and so like the fun that I have writing these stories is ultimately that it's a group of guys that are friends that are doing something quite literally stupid, and there's not a whole lot of reason for them to be doing what they're doing. They just seem to be doing it because that's really all they know. And a a part of me just thinks it's kind of nostalgic in a weird way of going back to all those times when we would all be hanging out and we'd all go and we'd do something ridiculous for no reason, and then you know and all that kind of stuff. And because we're all getting older and we don't necessarily get to see each other in the same way that we did when we were kids. So being able to write these characters in these ways kind of allows me to kind of further these adventures of these group of guys in a way that is fun and hopefully entertaining for everybody else who gets to read them. But the big thing is that I want them to be real. Like I want these characters to really feel like they're people that or people that you can kind of instantly familiarize yourself with them. It doesn't take a lot to really get Wes's motives behind what he's doing. Doesn't take a lot to figure out Vic and Lowell. It doesn't take a lot to figure out what TK's all about. These guys kind of they seem not generic, but they seem like they've already been they seem like they're lived in characters, and that a lot of people sort of can instantly recognize them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, obviously it's true for us because we recognize them immediately. But
right.
I think even a lot of the secondary characters in the book you can kind of spot, and some of the secondary characters you've talked about in upcoming work you're doing, it's like, yeah, some of them are based on people I know. Some of them are based on people that just and I don't know, but you still explain them, and I know that guy.
Yeah.
Even though I don't know that guy,
yeah.
I know a guy like that.
Right.
Or, whatever. So I know that Autumnville as a story was conceived a while ago, and it was the quote-unquote main story of Autumnville is not Ouroboros. It does not start here.
No.
And this was never necessarily a part of the plan of that novel that you were wanting to write.
Not in the least. No, not at all.
So you kind of came to this because it was a project you could work on, maybe ease into, and do for NaNoWriMo. Is there any other reason why you started here? You started here instead of what you had planned a decade ago or whatever?
Yeah, the original story was called, just simply called A Cult. And the notion of the world having, or the end of the world having come and gone and no one noticing, sort of began to become this scene of, the planes carrying the atomic bombs over the Pacific and going over China or Japan. And the idea was that these angels had sworn an oath that they would look after Earth until the end came, and then they were free. And the idea was that they had been here for a long, long time and that they were ready to go, And then the fourth horseman decides that he's not going to ride, and that he says that, that he thinks that humanity deserves another chance. And so he decides not to ride. And so the angels get angry with him, and a whole mess of stuff happens after that. But the general notion was that it was because of that event that the angels were decimated to the point where there was only about 7 left. And those 7 angels were left to look after the entire planet. And during the process, they went insane. And the original book started with that premise. And as much as I enjoyed it, I've written 4 full books of that story. 350,000 words at a minimum of each draft, 4 complete drafts, and but it was just that it took me so long to write them that by the time I would get from beginning to end, my perspective on things had changed. my style of writing had changed. The things that interested me had changed. All of that. So by the time I would finish a book, I would go, well, now I just got to go back and rewrite the final copy. And I kept doing that and doing it and doing it. And I would get done and go, well, this is good, but it's not quite what I wanted. And so I would kind of keep bouncing back and forth and back and forth. And eventually I just kind of realized that if I'm going to write anything and publish it and have a physical book in my hand, that I needed a little win first. I needed to lower that bar down to the floor and just step over it so that I could say I won. And I'd been kind of toying around with the idea of doing some short stories, compilations, and things like that. But, the truth of the matter is nobody really gives a shit about short story compilations. So when NaNoWriMo came around and you were like, we should do it, and I thought, yeah, sure, we can do that. And I mean, if you remember, we podcasted the week before NaNoWriMo started, and I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna just kind of go in. I don't really have anything planned. I'm just gonna wing it, and I'll bang out 50,000 words in a couple of days, and it'll be all good. And then by the end, I'm like, I got 15,000 words done, and it sucks so bad. And and a lot of that was because, I didn't really plan. I didn't really think too much ahead. What I knew was that I wanted to do something with Autumnville as a sort of rookie card, to kind of show up and say, this is my rookie card, and I'm gonna, keep going. And eventually, the story kind of fell together during that November. And so by the time December was over with and January started, I was able to jump right in and, pump out the whole book in January so that we could publish in February.
Yeah. It was kind of blazing fast. I do remember that. I mean, I know that you got plans for more Autumnville, obviously, because it says Volume 1 on it, or Number 1 on it.
Yeah.
So, we got much more to see with these characters. And I think, honestly, in my opinion, it works great as an introduction to, first of all, that whole group's dichotomy, their interaction together. And it works as a good introduction to the world. But you leave quite a few stones unturned. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of things there that you can continue to investigate.
Yeah.
And bring into the world. So I think it's a good effort. I mean, I'm a little biased, but I do enjoy it. I've read it 3 times in 3 different states, so I do like it. I think you did good.
I think I did too.
Good. So I wanted to kind of get into the process you used when you wrote. Like you just said, you wrote it at kind of a breakneck pace, and we've talked on here before about process and about staying motivated and stuff like that. So, obviously, how did you write this? I mean, did you sit down and marathon it like over, 15 days and get most of it out of the way, or did you just do short bursts day after day? Did you plot every detail? Stuff like that. I mean, what kind of process did you go through to get this on paper and then get it situated to where you were happy with it?
I think the way that I recall having done it was in the same kind of vein that when you started your project, that I was kind of not necessarily insistent, but kind of offering up as like, this is the best way to do it, which was to kind of sit down and plot things out and start figuring out the beats and where you're going to get that bass kick and where you're going to get the drum rolls and where you're going to get the cymbals and all the other stuff, so that everything had a kind of rhythm to it, and most importantly, that all of the errant plot lines were fairly easily tied up, so that I wasn't going to be leaving anything hanging out in the open. One of the the most important things for me is the idea of completing the circuit by the end of the book. And if every little detail doesn't kind of line up at the end, then there's some kind of massive failure further back that needs to get fixed. But one of the things that I employ that is kind of my secret weapon is our buddy Sean. What I like to do is we'll sit down on his back porch and smoke cigarettes and drink beer and scotch and whatever it is that is available. And what I'll do is I'll sort of stress test the storyline against him and say, here's what's happening, here's how it goes, here's this beat, here's that beat, here's this beat. And of course he has no idea what the big picture is. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting to stress test it against him, is because he has such a almost encyclopedic knowledge of like procedural cop shows and all those kinds of things, that he knows how to very kind of neatly tie up loose ends and how to make sure that little things are given the same attention as the giant overarching plots. And when I'm sitting down with him and I'm just kind of tossing out ideas and hearing what he has to say about them, what I'm doing then is I'm processing that information and I'm writing down my overall plot points, so that I know chapter 1 has this plot point, chapter 2 has this plot point, chapter 3 this one, etc., etc. And then when I sit down to write, the key thing for me is that what I really want to do is finish a chapter the night that I get started on it. Sometimes that didn't happen. Obviously, it took a month. There's only 12 chapters, well, 13 with the epilogues. But what I really wanted to do was, when I would sit down and I would start a new chapter, I would take out my notebook and I would write down how many scenes were going to be in each chapter, and what my cliffhanger needed to be at the end of each chapter to move me forward to the next one and the next one and the next one, etc. Because we had discussed this before. One of the things that I had done when I wrote the book was to imagine each chapter as an episode of a TV show. And so what I knew I needed to do was to have every chapter have a certain degree of, I really couldn't afford to give myself a narrative chapter or, just a plotline chapter, or a flashback chapter or anything like that. Even though I have all those elements in there, in order to pull off the book, in order for it to read as fast as it does, I had to make it so that each chapter felt like it was a miniature story inside of the story, so that you had a beginning, middle, and end in every chapter, so that you could sort of zip from one to the other, and hopefully the ending would propel you into the next one. And by the time I actually got to writing it, once I had figured out all the beats and all the other stuff that needed to be done, I would set myself a goal every night. There was one night in particular that I said, I'm going to write 10,000 words before I go to bed. I had gotten off work about an hour or so early. I got home, it was only 8 something, and I thought, I'm going to write 10,000 words before I go to bed. And that sucked because it was like 3 something when I finally went to bed. But for the most part, every night, what really mattered was just progress. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time worrying about word count or any of that kind of stuff. I was more focused on just progress. Even if it was 20 words, as long as I'd taken another step forward, I was happy,
Right.
It just so happened that the way that everything worked out, January being the kind of dead month that it is, I was able to rip through 50 some odd thousand words in a couple of weeks. It was just kind of dumb luck. But, it's something that I'm going to keep trying to do, give myself a month of prep, give myself a month off, give myself a month prep, and then give myself a month to write. So that in theory, I can churn out a book every 3 months. That's the goal.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be what happens, but we'll see.
It's a good thing to reach for.
Yeah.
And that kind of answers part of what I was going to ask. But did you find any things you tried in your process that you won't ever try again? Was there anything that you're like, yeah, it doesn't work for me, that came up specifically while you were trying to write this one?
When I was writing Ouroboros, one of the things that I tried very early on was the sort of Stephen King kind of thing where he says, don't write notes. You don't need notes. The good ideas stick around and the bad ones go away. Obviously that works for him, but man, it doesn't work for me.
Right.
Like, I would have these ideas and I'd be like, oh my God, this is such a great idea. And then 10 minutes later, I'd be like, shit, what was that idea? Why didn't I write it down? And then, and I just lost forever. And I was just like, son of a, every time. And so I just made sure that I had, the ability to make notes incessantly. I tend to be a very clean note taker to begin with, but for Ouroboros, luckily there wasn't a lot that I needed to make notes of. The story itself is fairly simple. It runs very ABC. Not a whole lot of complication. It's been described to me by people who've read it and as being more of a character piece than a sort of plot-driven thing. That a lot of people have read it and said that they enjoyed the characters, they enjoyed the storyline, but they felt like by the time the book was over, that was where it should have really kind of kicked into gear. And actually, like, that was almost like the beginning. Like they just read a really extended prologue.
Yeah.
And that's fine because, part of my muse, I guess, for a lot of the Autumnville storylines is Mike Mignola's work on Hellboy. And if you've ever read a Hellboy comic book, you know that those things Hellboy has to go do this, he goes, he does this, he fights this, he falls through a floor, stabs the bad guy, it's dead, over with. And I kind of like that. I think it's really nice, it's really short and sweet, and it's simple, and it leaves you wanting more, and it makes every little thing that the writer gives you somehow more important, because, not that the writer is intentionally starving his audience of material, but that he doesn't overdo it. He doesn't leave the audience stuffed at the end.
Right.
And I kind of like that. I kind of like that notion. It works for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. And my personal preference is more of I feel like people like characters more. I think that's because you can't possibly put yourself into a supernatural world scenario. Like you've never been in that before. But like we said earlier, these characters are familiar. Yeah. So I think that's good. We know that this is kind of a prologue to a lot more Autumnville stories.
Yeah.
And it is kind of an introduction to the world and to the characters and everything like that. So you self-published. Did you like self-publishing?
Yeah. Yes and no. I think that being in complete control of your product is wonderful. And I realize that editors are there to do a very specific job, and that their counsel is valuable in a lot of ways. But the idea of being able to sit down and write my story my way and publish it my way was exactly what I wanted. I didn't want another voice in my story. I didn't want other people stepping in because in my previous project, I had allowed some editors to kind of step in who were friends of mine or friends of mine and who were interested in seeing what I was doing. And they would always come at me with weird little caveats of, if you just made Vic and Lowell 18 years old and make them good looking, and set Autumnville as a beach town in California and, all this stuff, and to introduce all these female characters that were there to be these romantic counterparts to all four of the main characters. And I was like, give me a break. No, this is no. It's not that I have problems with the millennial readership. I think they're all great. And if they want to read supernatural teen romance, by God, let them. But I wanted to write something that I would want to read as a 30-something. Something that references 80s stuff, something that references 90s stuff, something that references the stuff that I know and just thoroughly enjoy it, and be able to take it in and to try and breathe as much life into these characters as possible. Try and make them, as well adjusted to their supernatural existence as possible. And I wouldn't have been able to do that under an editor. I wouldn't have been able to do that under a publishing house. I would have been, I'd have been nickel and dimed into, doing something that would have been, this sort of saccharine, it wouldn't have felt real. And so that part I really enjoyed. The part that I didn't enjoy was the chapter 3 mishap. The idea of not knowing how to market a book at all, not knowing who to turn to, what to do, how to set anything up, and just hoping like hell that someone gets their hands on it and decides that they're going to make it, their mission in life to
tell people.
Yeah, to get it out there, And I've been very fortunate that a lot of people have done that, that they've passed the book along or that they've pressured people into buying it, and and that's great, and another thing that does suck about doing it this way is that you're not going to pop up in your Barnes and Nobles and things like that because it's pay to print, so they're not going to sit there and go, well, let's print up 10 copies and see how it goes,
right?
Because they're not going to make a dime off of it. And that's something that I hope that they change about the process, that will allow us to do these self-published works and then be able to get them into bookstores without having to figure out some crazy system of, well, I can get the book cheaper than anyone else can, so if you pay me $8 per book, you're saving $4, so then when you sell it, you can recoup that $4, whatever it is, and that's something that I really don't like. But for the system that they've given us, being able to print for free, to create and print anything we want for free is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine if we had this ability when we were all in our 20s?
Oh my gosh.
We would have been coming up with the dumbest shit you could have imagined just to see it in print.
We would have been banned from Amazon.
Yeah, like they would have been like, never again.
Guys, stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can say, one of my questions was, what did you learn from this process? And that technical bit of a layout and a font and making sure all your chapters are there.
Yeah.
That stuff, we probably bit off way more than we could chew way too fast.
Yeah.
We should have let that soak a little bit, because I mean, we basically in 2 days copy edited and packaged it for the printer, basically. And there was a mishap where a chapter was missing. It's in there now, but that whole process to me, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is... I'm a computer programmer. This is easy. I got this. And then you're like, all right, let's do this. And then we blazed through it, and then we both missed it, and we missed a couple of other things. It's like, oh.
Yeah, and it happens, I mean, and a part of me knew that it was going to happen, that there was just no way that we were going to pull this off without some massive screw up somewhere in there, but, it's cool, and, one of the interesting things has been that, a lot of the people who bought the first run with the mishap in it have gone back and bought a second one, or have said that they're planning on going back and buying a second one, which is cool. I mean, it sucks. It just seems like if I had the ability to say, nay, here's a free fixed version, I would in a heartbeat. But that's not how Amazon works. They don't say, they don't let you have jack or shit for free. So
right, yeah. So, will you continue to self-publish then?
Yeah. I mean, I think if tomorrow some publishing house came to me and said, "Hey, we want to buy Autumnville," I think that I would still find other projects to do self-publishing stuff, just because it is fun and it's neat to kind of have your own little empire that you control, and even if nobody's paying attention, it's still really cool to have that, and to have your own book or your own selection of books that are up for sale, so that when you check the numbers every morning and you see, oh, I sold a book last night, like, it seems legit, all like you've accomplished something, and that's a really cool thing. Whereas I feel like if it was under a publishing house, it would be kind of a different thing, even though I know that publishing houses are notoriously stingy about promotion and things like that. Unless you're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, nobody's going to put a commercial for your book up anywhere. You have to pretty much commit to doing these long-winded tours of bookstores and signings and all these kinds of things. And that kind of thing sounds fantastic. It sounds like it'd be a blast to do. But, where I'm sitting, being able to do it yourself and just put it out and see where it goes, that's really what I enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. What's hypothetically, let's say there's a writer out there who's, extremely handsome, has a velvety voice, and is toiling with a story. Is there any advice you could offer that hypothetical individual?
I would tell him to stop dicking around with the plot and just write the story. We've talked about this numerous times, but really the only thing that works is just you have to write.
Right.
And it sucks. I hate it because not too long ago I had a young lady who is trying to write her first novel, and it's a doozy. She's saying that there's probably like 400,000 words in it, and that's fantastic. But she was just like, do you have any advice on what to do? And I was just like, every day, it doesn't matter if it's in the morning, in the afternoon, or if it's at night, whatever it is, but you've got to secure a solid 2 hours a day to sit down at that computer. And even if you just stare at a blank screen for 2 hours and just self-flagellate yourself, you got to do it. I've personally found that the sweet spot for me seems to be between 2 and 5 hours. I tend to get most done between 2 and 5 hours, but I also am notorious for going back and rereading everything I've written up until the blinking prompt. So like I will go through and spend the first hour just rereading everything that I've written and making tiny little adjustments, and then when I get to where it's just clear on till morning, I will start writing it. It's usually between 2 and 5 hours is what's good for me. But I've personally found that if you can convince people to sit for at least 2 hours and either plot or just tinker, you don't necessarily have to step in and go blazing into writing every day, but if you take the time to set yourself up every day so that the next day you already know what you're doing and you don't really have to spend a lot of time getting back into that mode, it's so much easier. It's so much easier to say, I'm going to spend 2 hours writing tonight. When I get done doing this, I'll go home and I'll write for 2 hours. And as soon as I'm done with that, I will hop in a shower, I'll watch Joe Rogan Experience, I'll do whatever it is I'm going to do until the wee hours of the morning. But I'm also going to be spending most of my brain power is going to be used into figuring out what tomorrow is going to be, so that as soon as I sit down tomorrow, it's already working.
You've been sleeping on it.
Yeah,
it's been percolating.
Yeah, there's been time. It's been debated. It's been worked out in my head, and as soon as I get back, I will be able to jump right back in. And even if that means spending most of my day at work, just casually going over and over the storyline in my head, so be it. I mean, my job's not that hard. I don't have to put a whole lot of brain power into it, so I can just kind of drift off and think about fantasy stuff for a while.
Yeah,
and it works. Even if it's you sitting down beforehand and working the beats out, and then just dating the beats, saying on this day this beat will be done, and hold yourself accountable for it.
Right.
I mean, imagine if when you were doing your story about the Memoirs of Eli, and you took that beat list that you showed me and you had it dated so that every day you're going to have this much done, we'd be on the 3rd book by now. You're
giving me some credit there, I think.
Yeah, maybe, but I still think that it would happen. I mean, real life always gets in the way, and it sucks, but the truth of the matter is that it's no different than these fitness psychos who manage to find 2-3 hours a day to run on a treadmill or lift weights or do whatever crazy shit it is that they're going to do. Let them do that crazy stuff. If they can afford to do that with a 9-to-5 and kids and all that kind of shit, finding 2 hours to express yourself creatively, not that hard.
No.
If it just means getting up a little earlier in the morning, so be it. If it means staying up an extra hour at night, so be it. But if you can give yourself just that 2 hours where you can express yourself, you're so much further ahead.
Well, one thing you hit on there was the priming, the idea of priming.
Yeah.
Before you go to bed. And that has worked for me. Like in the things that I have worked on, if I sit and if I write at night, which I don't do a lot, I'm trying to do more of, but once I'm done and I put away the keyboard and I'm going to go sit down and veg out and watch some television or something, I'll take some time before I go to bed to think about what's next in my story. And then the next morning I get up to write and it comes out easier.
Yeah.
Well, it's never as much of a fight.
And the truth of the matter is that if you are going to write, there is nothing better than forcing yourself to run through what you want to do next and then sleeping on it. And then as soon as you wake up, getting up and writing. It works wonders and there's a tonal shift that happens that's kind of weird that I've noticed. Maybe you've noticed it too. But when you write in the morning, there's a sort of maybe a positivity that's in the work.
Yeah.
That the nighttime seems to, when you write it at night, it seems like you're expressing a lot of your frustrations from the day. The work just seems to be slightly more negative than it is when it's bright and early in the morning. And I don't know if that's universal or not.
I would say that's more dependent upon what the day held.
Yeah.
Like if you won the lottery that day, I doubt there'd be much negativity in that writing.
That's probably true.
So, I mean, I think there's definitely something to that.
Yeah.
And for me, writing in the evening is not so much like a preparedness thing. It's I need to give my brain a break from the day. And then once I do that, I never return to the task. And so then I've always found I'm way more productive in the morning. But I also think that if I started exercising that writing muscle at night, I'd get better at it at night.
Yeah.
I don't think that you have to be pigeonholed into a time of day to write.
Yeah.
That basically is what I'm saying. But that priming thing works for sure.
Yeah.
I really think it does.
Yeah, it definitely does. I know that, thankfully I'm in a position where I get to daydream a lot, and that lets me spend a lot of time getting ahead of myself in the storyline and figuring out the individual beats, how I want them to work. Doing the comedy stuff kind of comes a little bit naturally. Doing the horror stuff doesn't, which is kind of weird. Because I've always been a huge horror fan. I love horror stuff, but the truth of the matter is that most of these characters in my world are people that I know in real life. It's the idea of just having them get ripped up randomly by some monster is kind of abhorrent. Like, I don't want to kill these people.
Yeah.
And so, I have to sort of create these sort of soulless characters, like the babysitter is in Autumnville. And even the two kids, unfortunately, from that scene, with the clown, I had to create sort of soulless characters that I could hurt with impunity and not feel bad about it.
Right.
Which is dumb. It's so stupid, but it's the truth. You feel bad when your cast is predominantly real people, and then you do horrible things to them, and you feel like you have to explain yourself.
You got to go apologize to them later.
And it's just one of those things. But the priming thing is definitely a big deal. Like, it really works. Even if it's just taking the time out when you're driving to work, put on some music, put on NPR or whatever it is that you like, and then just start thinking about it like a film in your head. Run it through. I do it every night when I go to bed. I close my eyes and I roll credits, and whatever the scene is that I need to work out in my head, those characters appear on the inside of my eyelids, and they start going back and forth. And if there's something stupid, then it gets rewound and it starts all over, and it just keeps going back and forth until it works. And then once that's done, then I sort of crystallize that image in my head, and the next day I sit down and I write it.
Very cool. Very cool. I only got one more. Will you still be writing in 10 years?
In 10 years, I hope to be doing nothing but write. If it were up to me, this regular Joe having a job thing, it sucks. I don't want to do it.
Sure.
I'm tired of it, and I don't need J.K. Rowling numbers or George R.R. Martin numbers. I don't need that. If I could just sell 10, 15, 20,000 copies, more than enough. I'd be happy, man. I could easily get by, pump out 3 books a year, I'd be happy.
Well, our podcasts usually get around 10,000 to 12,000 listeners.
Yeah.
Weeks.
Yeah.
I don't think
At
you're going to have any
least.
problem after this. You're going to get the Friday Night Writes bump from this.
Yeah, which I hope does some good.
That's all I had, man. I I think it's fun, and like I said, I am biased, but I mean the pace of this thing, like you said, is almost like cinematic. It moves fast. It's frenetic, and it's a fast read and a fun read. And I think you did a good job. I can't wait to read more. And there's going to be more, right?
Yes, Autumnville 2, the Weird Prairie Almanac. I'm debating. I want to use Companion. I really do. I really want to call it the Weird Prairie Companion. Just because. But for right now, it's called the Weird Prairie Almanac. And it is 13 short stories that introduce at least one new character into the Autumnville continuity. But each story is sort of designed to flow into the other and into the next and the next and the next, sometimes in unexpected ways that provides you with a complete narrative by the time you get to the end. You'll have experienced a multitude of different characters that live in Autumnville or in the outskirts of Autumnville, and you will be introduced to one of the new villains, as well as several other bad guy types, some of the new superhero types that'll be joining up with the crew, and most importantly, the element that I've been snapped at more about than anything is I'll be introducing our new female leads into the continuity, so that when I start work on Autumnville 3, people will be able to say, hey, there's a female presence in this story, not just four guys and
making fart jokes.
Yeah, and screwing up all the time. So, which I'm excited about. Like, it's one of the things. Like I said, I did get raked a bit for not having a female lead, and the thing is that I felt that the Anna character was a suitable female presence, but in retrospect, she didn't get a lot of screen time, and I can understand why people rake me over the coals a bit about it. But now that I'll be introducing the characters Abby and Kay and Charlie into the mix, it will hopefully change the dynamic a lot, and offer up some more interesting character dynamic between the whole crew. I figure having 4 guys and 3 girls, and two of the main guys being married to women who aren't the 3 new girls being and having it set up clearly so that none of these characters are intended to be romantically involved with one another. Like that's sort of something I'm really trying to avoid, is dealing with that romantic crap. I want it to be, a group of friends who are doing what they're doing. And so, I'm pretty hyped. I think once I get used to writing a cast that big, it should make things a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
There's a speed and a flow to Vic and Lowell that I really enjoy. That sort of Abbott and Costello kind of back and forth. And adding in TK and Wes into that mix is also very fun, because the TK being sarcastic and the Wes being such a pessimist adds a lot of really fun dynamic between the 4 guys. And I worried that even introducing one new character was going to somehow upset that balance. But I just kind of said to hell with it and threw in 3 more just to make it even more difficult. So,
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. I'm hoping to have it finished here pretty soon I'm not going to put a time or a date on it. I want to get it right, and once it's right, it'll be out.
Good.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to tell everybody here anyway.
Yeah. All 20,000.
All 20,000.
Yeah.
30,000 by the end of this.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. So.
Well, thanks for going through all that for us. I know.
My pleasure.
I know some people wanted to hear that kind of stuff, and we like to do that here. So, just a quick recap: we're at FridayNightWrites.net. You can find our podcast feed there. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. This should go up. We try to put these up every Thursday. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/FridayNightWrites. FN Writes. Facebook.com/FN Writes. We're there too. And we'll also post the podcast updates on there. And if you go to the site and you haven't seen a lot of activity, like I said, we're gonna be posting some blog posts in the upcoming weeks. I got a couple of things in the works myself.
Yeah, I posted a blog post just a couple days ago, and I posted the first chapter of Autumnville 2,
That's right.
Weird Prairie Almanac, on the site, so you can read it for free if you like, and if you have an opinion, I'd appreciate hearing it.
Yep. All right, Fuzz. I'll talk to you next week, I guess.
Okie dokie.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep. See you later.
She's the kind of girl you dream of keeping hold of. Better forget it. Ooh.